around that line of questioning. Turning now to Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
So, Mr. Matthews, Mr. Yeo, the owner of Dalian, got contracts worth millions of dollars before joining your department. That's correct?
Yes, he has contracts with Defence and with other departments as well.
So you said his salary range was between $80,000 and $100,000 a year, which is a good salary. But do you not find it odd that this individual, Mr. Yeo, a millionaire, making 30% on these contracts, would then pursue employment with the department that he was getting business from as a contractor to make his millions?
So, to answer your question simply, yes, I do find that odd, and I find it concerning. I will say that one of the things he was aware of was a plan to consolidate some of the contracts we had on that project team. So there was a risk that his contracted work would end. That may have factored into his choice to become a public servant, but it is hard to comprehend if he truly was making the amount of money through his business dealings that we now think he was, through the markups, etc. It's hard for me to understand how that math works for him as an employee, unless he was able to do his other business at night and on weekends, and this just offered some steady income. But the math is questionable for sure.
Yeah, he described his position as a very low-level position, and so it's highly suspicious, at best, that this would be allowed to happen.
Allowed to happen in terms of his choice, but you're quite right, or the member is quite right, Mr. Chair. There are no public servants reporting to him or were reporting to him in that job. He is at the bottom of the org chart. He probably was supervising a few contractors, but it is a low-level position.
So he described himself as leading teams.
If he was leading a team, Mr. Chair, he may have been leading some contractors, but he was not leading any public servants or military members.
Would any of those subcontractors been subcontractors of Dalian?
We don't believe so, but we are confirming, because the reason I say, and Troy will jump here in a second, I'm pretty sure, almost 100% sure not Dalian. I mentioned that he has business dealings with other companies, and I think we know who they are, but I can't say with 100% certainty. We've got all that nailed down, so we want to confirm that. Troy may have an update.
Mr. Chair, we have looked into this. There were 5 contractors working on the team that Mr. Yeo was leading the project. Those contractors had all been in place prior to him starting with us as a public servant, and none of them were resources provided by Dalian.
Okay. Certainly the committee and parliamentarians would be eager to see a return on any work that you're preparing specifically in this regard, if you'd be willing to provide it.
So I think 2 parts to that, maybe, Mr. Chair. One, if we can offer a list of the other companies that we know Mr. Yeo dealt with in terms of subcontracting joint ventures. And maybe, Troy, if there's something else we can provide on those other contracts.
So I do want to know, Mr. Crosby, do you know who they worked with? Where these resources were supplied from?
We have the contract names and can provide that.
You'll provide that. Okay, that's great. 1 minute? Well, as I said, Mr. Matthews, the appearance of a conflict of interest. This is what we find, the situation we find ourselves in. And this is why, the committee voted to ban double dipping, because it creates this situation where, in this case, we have an individual with offshore bank accounts making millions of dollars in a way that I think, frankly, the general public finds objectionable, to be taking, 30% on 30% on commissions, particularly Indigenous set-asides where the work is not being done by Indigenous subcontractors by the admission of Mr. Yeo, and then taking this job and working inside the very organization that he's trying to win business from. With that framing in mind, do you still maintain that you think that it's appropriate for members of your department to also be contractors for your department?
I maintain, Mr. Chair, that I believe it's appropriate if it's properly disclosed and there are no conflicts.
Thank you
And I
very
do
much.
want to remind the
No,
committee that,
Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
you know, public servants, I believe that is true, that if properly disclosed, that might be okay in terms of what they do in their own time. Let's not forget at Defense, we have armed forces members, same rule set, but also reservists who we expect to have other jobs. And so, again, as long as it's properly disclosed and signed off.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. I'm afraid-
Mr. Yeo
I'm
was
afraid-
not a reservist, just to be
Mr. Baird,
clear.
I'm afraid you're done. There is more time for.
Frankly, the general public finds objectionable.
I don't believe so, but we are confirming that might be okay in terms of what they do in their own time.